Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Spirits of Massachusetts. I'm Cody Mason, and today we'll be discussing the Danvers State Hospital. Danvers State Hospital was a psychiatric hospital constructed in 1878. It's also been referred to as the Danvers State Insane Asylum, the State Lunatic Asylum at Danvers, and the Danvers Lunatic Asylum. The building originally was made up of two main center buildings, one for administration and one for attendance. In the main building were two wings for male and female patients, and the outermost wards reserved for the most hostile patients. As years went on, more buildings were added to Danvers State, including a new gymnasium, and all were connected through tunnel systems. The hospital also expanded its purpose from being residential care for the mentally ill. It introduced a training program for nurses and added pathological research labs on top of its initial purpose. Despite its increase in size, the hospital had an absolute maximum of 1,500 patients, and it seated 2,000 patients in the late 1940s. Overcrowding was so severe, patients were held in the basement of the Kirkbride complex, and some patients would die, their bodies not being found till they had begun to decompose. Patients were reportedly subjected to lobotomies, shock therapy, and were tied in straitjackets to keep them under control. Deinstitutionalization in the 1960s would decrease the population of Danvers State even further, as more humane and alternative treatments to mental illness would arise. Danvers State had major budget cuts in the 1960s that would close major wards in the facility. By the mid-80s, the majority of Danvers State Hospital had closed down, including the administration block, and prisoners were transferred to other medical buildings. Finally, the campus was closed in the early 90s and almost completely demolished in the mid-2000s. Nowadays, the site is home to luxury apartments and condo complexes called Bradley Apartments. However, even after the destruction of the hospital, plenty of ghost hunters would flock to the site to investigate, since the hospital's history was so morbid. One anecdotal story of spirits at Danvers State comes from Geraldine Levasseur, daughter of hospital administrator Gerald Richards. Geraldine lived in the administrator's quarters with her father, and she would often play in the attic with her siblings. One day, she saw the spirit of an elderly woman in the corner of the attic, and would subsequently label the attic as off-limits. The same spirit of an elderly woman would awaken her from her sleep several times, and even pull the covers off of her bed. Paranormal investigators who have gone through the tunnels of Danvers State Hospital have reported seeing the ghost of the asylum's first administrator, Thomas Kirkbride. Thomas Kirkbride was known to hide more volatile patients in the tunnels of Danvers State, so it's no wonder that investigators have been able to see and contact him there. Danvers State would be the location of the early 2000s psychological horror film Session 9. When asked about filming on site, star David Caruso said, "It was a place you never got comfortable in. It wasn't like day 3 and we were throwing water balloons because it was so much fun to be there. It was always scary. You can really feel the pain of the people that went through Danvers. It's a rough environment. It's not fun. It's in the film. They didn't have to dress the sets or anything. All of that stuff was sitting there. The federal government walked away from it about 30 years ago. It was a terrifying location." Those who wished to visit the site, in spite of it having changed significantly, have reported black shadow figures following them. There are 2 cemeteries and 770 graves linked to Danvers State, one at the site itself and one a mile and a half down the road in Middleton. Portion of the graves at each cemetery are unable to be identified, and while groups have tried to identify and recover some of those buried, clumsy restoration attempts have unfortunately destroyed some sites. A portion of the graves at each cemetery are unable to be identified, and while groups have tried to identify and recover some of those buried, clumsy restoration attempts have unfortunately destroyed some stones. Perhaps the souls of those lost to primitive surgeries and medical practices remain on site and refuse to be forgotten one way or another. Crying and disembodied voices are also heard on the property, echoes of the torture that Danvers State patients once endured. Danvers State, and the horrors that have gone on inside the walls, have made a massive impact on popular culture. H.P. Lovecraft based the Arkham Sanatorium Institution from The Thing on the Doorstep on Danvers State. In turn, Arkham Asylum from the Batman franchise is based on Lovecraft's interpretation of the institution, so Danvers State serves as inspiration by proxy. Lovecraft would mention the institution by name in his short stories Pickman's Model and The Shadow over Innsmouth. The world of gaming, both video games and tabletop, have implemented the state hospital as well, being the main setting for the Call of Cthulhu campaign Genius Loci, and being a playable level in the game Painkiller. Despite its influence and its popularity amongst the paranormal community, what remains of Danvers State is not open to the public. It is, once again, home to condos and apartments and is considered private property. There is security there, and they're prepared for any trespassers wishing to investigate paranormal activity. That's all I've got for today, folks. What do you think? Could there still be souls of patients lurking around Danvers State? Is it as haunted as it's made out to be? That's for you to decide. I'm Cody Mason, and this has been Spirits of Massachusetts.